How on earth will Peter Parker ever hope to defeat the Hobgoblin Roderick Kingsley when he can't even trust his own body and mind? Well, let's hop into the pages of Amazing Spider-Man issue number 4 and find out the answer together, shall we? So then, as we rejoin the story in progress, we actually check back on in with Peter's brand new boss over at the Rand Corporation. She likes Peter, even despite his rather sketchy history in the world of corporations and super science. But she also wonders aloud to Brian if she can keep him around if he's such a flake. I mean, he keeps going up to the roof, his hands are always sweaty, what's going on with him? Only for Brian to mention, oh no, he's not unreliable, he's just on drugs. Which, in a normal business setting, would probably be the worst thing on earth you could possibly say, but in this situation, it actually ends up coming back to save Peter later, but more on that in a minute. Now, from there, we actually transition on over to Spider-Man himself. At the end of the last issue, he had managed to infiltrate a bottling plant, which just so happened to be packaging the very same psychoactive drugs that caused Rhino to freak out in downtown and caused Peter to basically end up losing his own mind over the last several issues. The bottling plant is actually a front for the Hobgoblin, Roderick Kingsley, who claims that Spider-Man is ruining his plan to bottle anxiety. Pfft, joke's on you, Kingsley, I already mainline enough natural anxiety as it is. Also, picking up on what I said in the last issue, this is the Roderick Kingsley version of the Hobgoblin, but he's using the flaming sword and wings, which are normally synonymous with the Phil Urich Hobgoblin. I mean, what the hell, is this an art mistake, a writing mistake? It certainly doesn't gel with Kingsley's character. Before he got involved with drugs, he was a fashion designer. Why would he wear someone else's fit? Did Joe Kelly just see the newest Hobgoblin suit and go, oh yeah, that one, draw him in that one? Honestly, Kingsley himself doesn't even make up a huge part of this story. He manages to knock Spider-Man around pretty much entirely because Spider-Man is still fighting his own mind in the drugs that were dosed to him a couple issues ago. Hell, he doesn't even finish the fight with Kingsley, who is forced to leave after his henchwoman Itsy Bitsy returns to him and says that one of their contacts inside the Justice Department just tipped them off about the Rand Corporation uncovering the fact that they were dosing their sodas with drugs. A fact of which wouldn't even have been possible if Peter didn't bring this to Brian and Brian didn't end up blurting it out to their boss. How about that? I guess Parker luck can sometimes work in the opposite direction too, huh? Hobgoblin decides to fly off to Rand to kill Brian and leaves Itsy Bitsy behind to redeem herself by killing Spider-Man. Though, again, for the second time, the actual fights with the villains end up coming second to the hallucinations that Spider-Man is suffering from. In this situation, he sees the ghosts of his past. Harry Osborn, Captain George Stacy, and oh hey look, even Ben Reilly, it's nice that he got invited to the party considering he's not dead. They rake Peter over the coals over his many personal failures, though in an interesting take, they actually find an angle I haven't really considered before, and that is, hey Peter, you would do anything to try and help and save the life of a complete stranger, yet at the same time, you seem to let the people closest to you in your life suffer the most. You've been doing it your whole life, and it's only a matter of time before your so-called Parker luck ends up claiming the life and sanity of even your new friends like Shay. But where exactly does this sort of behavior come from, this massive chasm between Peter's words and Peter's actions? Well, plenty of writers have put their stamp on it over the years, and Kelly ends up doing the same here. You see, to answer that question, we once again flash back to Peter's misspent youth during his bad boy era, wherein he hung out with Brian and two other unnamed troublemakers in a group called the Freaktastic Four. In fact, as we learn in this issue, they were actually the ones who got Peter drunk for the very first time. Mostly the other boys complained about their parents, but Peter had no parents to complain about because he was currently being raised by his aunt and uncle, and when he comes home later that night throwing up his guts due to the booze, it's actually Aunt May who ends up sitting with him and who actually ends up cutting to the core of why Peter is so angry right now and why he's been rebelling. Aunt May says that her and Ben may not be Peter's biological parents, but they're going to do everything in their power to love him through this rough patch. After all, he is a normal kid, and being part of a normal kid's life does indeed include being rebellious, trying out new things, even hanging out with the wrong crowd from time to time. May just hopes that none of this will actually end up impacting the way Peter feels about her and Ben, and she does indeed feel like their relationship has taken a major hit recently, and it's right here that Peter finally feels feels confident enough to open up about what's really been eating him this whole time. You see, in his heart of hearts, he fears that Ben and may end up leaving him just like his parents did. Which is why he's been acting like such a jerk recently, preemptively pushing them away in hopes that he wouldn't have to deal with any future separation anxiety. And once again, it's Aunt May who ends up swooping on in with a great pearl of wisdom, basically saying, hey, don't cut yourself short, don't cut yourself off and push people away because you're afraid of being hurt. Love, compassion, connection, and companionship are some of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves in this life. And they're so special and so powerful because they bring with them the weight of potential loss. This is why, despite Peter sometimes screwing things up in his personal life with the people he loves and who he's closest to, he still tries to maintain those connections even while dealing with the weight of being a hero. Peter tells Aunt May how much he loves her, and wouldn't you know it, at that very second he ends up shattering his delusion and freaking the ever-loving hell out of Itsy Bitsy, who, despite what she said earlier about not actually harboring an Elektra-style complex for Peter, it's still very much there, and this I love you threw her off her game good enough for Peter to get the upper hand and web her up. It's after the fight, Peter actually ends up getting a call from Bryant at Rand, who says that he's managed to crack the code on a cure for the Hobgoblin's poison. Too bad for him, it's at that very moment Kingsley is flying directly at him as the comic comes to a close. And so that was Amazing Spider-Man issue number 4, everybody, and man, I gotta tell you, this is probably the most conflicted I felt about this series since the very beginning. On one hand, the actual superhero stuff is fairly unremarkable and a little generic. This feels like every other fight with the Hobgoblin Peter has ever had before. And despite Joe Kelly's love and passion for a character he created, Itsy Bitsy continues not to really do it for me as a villain. But then, on the other hand, you actually have this fairly sweet, fairly resonant little character piece about Peter and Aunt May during a time in their lives that we've never actually seen before. That stuff not only works, but actually ends up working really well in my estimation, mainly because I cannot remember the last time someone actually buckled down and tried to do real honest character work with Peter Parker. And like, yeah, when you break it down, he's a dick to his aunt and his uncle because he's afraid of losing them, like how he lost his parents. That feels like an after-school special, but it might as well be revolutionary, considering the level of detachment that the last several Spider-Man writers have decided to write Peter with. He actually felt human and relatable here. Hell, it might have been a series of drug-induced flashbacks, but Aunt May actually had a lot to do in the story here, and got to share meaningful wisdom that we can see shape Peter for the rest of his life. And you know what, I guess I'm just a sucker for stuff like that at the end of the day. Overall, I would give this one another very positive 7 out of 10. It's not breaking new ground or reinventing the wheel or anything, but the fact that I think 4 issues in I can say that Spider-Man under Joe Kelly is actually consistent for the first time in a long time might be a miracle. Hey there everyone, it's your pal Cape Joel again, and if you're seeing my face right now, that means you watched to the end of the video, and I'll always be grateful for that. Retention helps in this crazy YouTube game, and so does becoming a patron. If you head on down to the description, you can find a link to my Patreon page. Recently just redid all the tiers, a lot of cool stuff offering up there, exclusive commentaries, exclusive polls, behind the scenes concept art for Capes and Quest. That's the brand new D&D show I've started soon. Never been a better time to become a patron. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month and help the channel grow and, help me continue to deliver content like what you just saw. So I want to thank you all, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.